Hey everybody, Monica King here with King's Titan Homestead. And today, right now, just grab yourself a tea or coffee or whatever time it is. And let's just hope you see this before it's too late, because we do have a deadline. So I'm just going to quickly read to you the letter that was sent and to the National Honey Board from the American Beekeeping Federation. So, to whom it may concern, the American Beekeeping Federation is opposed to the National Honey Board's proposed rule change to increase the assessment rate on honey, first handlers, and importers. Congress's original intent in establishing Agricultural Marketing Service and all subsequent marketing orders, including the National Honey Board, was supposed to support domestic industry. The National Honey Board was specifically created to support the domestic honey industry, which they have failed to do. The current use of funds is not aligned with supporting the domestic honey industry, and additional funding gained through an increase in the assessment collected on honey will do nothing to change that. So basically, the National Honey Board is not like what we assume that terminology national to mean. Technically, it's the International Honey Board now. It is no longer mainly benefiting American honey producers. So let's read on. The American Beekeeping Federation is a national organization representing beekeepers of all scales for over 80 years. They witnessed the creation of the National Honey Board and its subsequent failure to meet Congress's directive to increase market shares and exports, and financial viability of the industry, and enhance the conservation effects of a vibrant honeybee industry on native plants and productive crops. In September of 1984, the USDA Economic Research Service published that major contributing factors to the decline in honeybee numbers from the mid-50s to the 70s include the low rate of return on invested capital, high labor demand, heavy loss of bees due to insecticides, and the dwindling size of bee pasture due to urban expansion and more intensive farming. It's gotten worse. This has not gotten better. And so, this is what it was created for, was for the stresses that the bees and the beekeepers are under financially, just trying to make a living and put food on, the consumers' tables. And it's not getting any better because they're mostly promoting foreign imported honey now. Well, let's read on. In October of 1984, the National Honey Board was enacted by Congress under the Honey Research Promotion and Consumer Information Act. That's really a great thing, right? I'd be, woohoo, I'm all for that. And it was started with the best of intentions in mind. Congress realized the importance of having an organization under the USDA after determining that development and implementation of coordinated programs of research, promotion, and consumer education necessary for maintenance of markets and development of new markets had been inadequate due to the nature of the honey production industry within the United States, which comprised mainly of small and medium-sized businesses who were struggling to compete with large quantities of low-cost imported honey, replacing the domestic honey in the normal trade channels. I get it. People don't have money. They want the cheapest product, but you cannot lie to them, and that's what irritates me. The market for domestic honey has failed to improve since the National Honey Board was established. Honey continues to receive less of its parity value, and the price of honey is not keeping up with the cost of labor. Even at farmers markets, people come to me and go, oh, that price is ridiculous. I just can't afford that honey. And it's like, I'm not making look at my truck. I'm like, I'm not making any money here. I'm struggling to get by. I love my bees so much. Most of the money goes back into my bees. And that's the same thing across the nation. The beekeepers are trying to keep their bees alive for the next season, spending labor. There's labor costs. There's, just keeping them healthy, cost involved and all that. And then, you guys complain, the consumer complains about the cost of the honey. Well, that's because we're having this imported honey at lower prices due to, they don't have the labor cost over, and people will be like, oh, but you import laborers, but, oh yeah, but they're not cheaper than having an American laborer, but they do labor that American laborers won't do anymore. So, okay, back to the letter. Sorry about that. Okay. Additionally, the labor required for each hive has increased due to the weakened honeybee health from imported parasites and pests. More cost, right? Parity pricing was established by Congress in the Agricultural Marketing Act of 1937. It was meant to maintain orderly marketing conditions by establishing a pricing standard for farmers. In 1937. We've been having this issue for almost 100 years now. The parity price is the calculated equivalent for a commodity when compared to the historical agricultural markets. In 1980, the parity price of honey was 92 cents per pound, and the average price of honey sold in the United States was 61 cents per pound. The average price of honey was 66.3% of parity. Nobody's making any money. How can you afford to feed your family, put your kids through college, when you're not even at parity pricing? But the average consumer, doesn't understand that, because beekeepers are under attack. They're under attack on all fronts. And now this is even worse. We continue. The gap between the parity of honey and the current market has grown. In 2024, the calculated parity price was $8.01 per pound, and the average price of honey was $2.69 a pound, making the average price 33.6%, or 1/3 of parity. Nobody. We can't even call that a profession where you're making a living, because that's not a living. Not at all. The cost component of labor to produce a pound of honey has increased significantly faster than the market value of honey. The majority of the cost associated with the production of honey and the maintenance of beehives is labor. Thus, the price of honey should grow at a similar rate to the cost of labor. As noted, the farm gate value of honey went from 61 cents a pound to $2.41 a pound from 1980 to 2024. A 295% increase over about 45 years. Within that same time frame, the hourly cost of first-line farm supervisors, managers, went from $5.25 an hour to $30.46 an hour, a 480% increase. You want to know why he's quoting that price for labor? Because we can't get people to work at all. I mean, you can't get people to work in bees, being stung, in suits and personal protective equipment, in the heat, for low price. You just can't do it. Nobody wants to do that. Even the workers that we import from like Nicaragua and stuff, I mean, they don't want to do it either. I've tried getting, I'm like, okay, I'll try not to talk about that. The market price of honey has not kept up with the cost of labor. Moreover, the labor input in terms of hours per hive has increased due to parasites and pests, mites and viruses. This market has made it nearly impossible for honey producers and beekeepers to remain in business. Guess what? The Tropea laelaps is on the horizon. If you don't know about the Tropea mite, that one is going to actually increase labor even more, because one of the main ways to control that mite is to do a brood break. So we have to cage our queen. We have to get in there, physically find the queen, cage her, stop her production, which stops the amount of nurse bees that we have inside the colony. And all of this is labor intensive, and yet the beekeepers are not being compensated for all this increase in labor from the cost of the honey. So it is clear in the founding documents that the intent of Congress was not to bolster foreign product sales, but rather to increase the financial viability and stability of domestic food production. If the intent was to promote foreign honey, there would have been no need to establish the National Honey Board. You see a cheap product on the shelf, you just grab that one, right? The thing is educating the consumer about quality, about what they're getting, not to allow false labeling. Oh, I think we might get to this pretty soon here. Large quantities of low-cost imported honey have been brought into the United States, replacing domestic honey in the normal trade channels. This is why the National Honey Board was created. The National Honey Board has gone against Congress's intent and blatantly promoted foreign honey in articles and videos found directly on their website from countries such as Brazil, Argentina, and Vietnam, all of which are countries known for honey fraud. You want to know why they're known for honey fraud? It's because we have actually areas, I won't mention China, where they actually are banned from importing honey here because they adulterate the honey with a rice syrup, which is very hard to detect when they're being tested for adulteration. That is very hard to detect. So they just ship their honey to these countries and it gets relabeled and then imported into the United States. Foreign honey needs no help in the American market. If we look back less than 100 years, the U.S. was producing nearly all of its honey, with the exception of some specialty honeys making up a minuscule portion of the market. Taste testing. Enjoying floral sources from another pure, raw honey. I mean, I can't even get to taste a type of honey from a foreign market now because is it real? I mean, you don't even know. So you have to directly import from a beekeeper now in order to know if it's even real raw honey from that floral source that you want to taste. I mean, some of us, are just connoisseurs of honey and we want to have the right honey. So for instance, I bought some buckwheat honey from Amish label out of Pennsylvania. And this is even in America. This is American honey. And I bought it off of Amazon. Yeah. And my dad is a connoisseur. He knows through years and years and years and years of taste testing what buckwheat honey should taste like. And when he tasted it, it literally was burnt honey. The packer somehow got hold of burnt honey, old burnt honey, and it's black honey, it's dark honey. Well, we'll just label it to the consumer as buckwheat. Yeah. These things happen. That's what the National Honey Board should be there for, is to help us within the United States have a quality honey. And it should also be against false labeling. It should be, things like that. I think we're going to get to that here. So if we look back less than 100 years, the U.S. was producing nearly all of its honey. From 1950 to 1965, the U.S. exported more honey almost every year than it imported. It was not until after 1965 that the volume of imports outgrew the volume of exports. In 1955, the U.S. imported 9.9 million pounds while exporting 20.5 million pounds of honey. By 1980, the scales had flipped and the U.S. was importing 49 million pounds and exporting only 8.5 million pounds. The volume of imports has only increased. In 2025, imported honey made up 84% of the U.S. honey market. 84% of the honey on our shelves and in our food is from imported honey. 84%. Only 16% was produced domestically. Domestic beekeepers cannot survive in a market flooded with cheap imported honey. Congress knew this in the 1980s when the National Honey Board was formed, and it is still just as true today, if not worse. Imports of low-cost honey resulting in more tons of honey being moved at a lower price isn't marketing. It's just economics 101. This mercantilistic practice being foisted upon domestic producers is destroying domestic production. Since 2016, honey labeled as organic, oh, that's a sore spot in my side, has been eligible to receive an assessment refund under the Commodity Promotion Law. So in other words, if they label it as organic when they're importing it, there is no assessment on it. Who controls how it's labeled in a foreign country? What is the bees? Bees are not controlled. Bees go forage, average 3 miles. What's in a 3 miles radius? We cannot call, here in the United States, we cannot call our honey organic, but yet foreign imports of organic honey can use that label. This is so wrong. The National Honey Board should be totally like wiping that label off of anything brought in from a foreign import. Okay, I'm off. The U.S. organic standards for honey are nearly impossible to meet by any U.S. beekeeper with the exception of a few small operations in Hawaii. Thus, nearly all of the honey labeled USDA organic and receiving assessment exemptions is coming from overseas. Does the average consumer even know that? Where the standards are not as strict. Well, duh. Physical inspections are not required. I told you that. And general oversight is lacking. Exactly. Who's in charge of the organic labeling laws in other countries? According to data collected by Nielsen IQ and published by the National Honey Board in 2026, organic honey has gained 2 share points over the past 4 years. Yes, consumers are becoming more aware of what they're putting in their bodies. The problem is the lie on the label makes them assume that they're actually consuming organic honey. Okay. And is expected to continue growing. I would see that. In 2025, the total assessments collected by the National Honey Board were, drumroll, $10,304,525. And of that, $1,002,681 was refunded because it had the label organic on it. And $1,675,552 was collected from domestic assessment. The National Honey Board has shown that it's willing to exempt a class of honey, organic, which is equivalent to refunding 62% of the U.S. production. Organic production is likely to overtake the volume of domestic honey in the market in the near future. However, this is not benefiting the U.S. honey producers. The National Honey Board has exempted the organic class of honey to follow the will of Congress. Domestic producers should be exempt from the honey assessment and imported organic be assessed, thus building the domestic honey industry. The National Honey Board should exempt domestically produced honey from the assessment fee, which would benefit U.S. honey producers. The National Honey Board claims that the use of their funding and the increase in the assessment is justified because the honey industry has experienced significant growth. However, all the industry growth has been only in the imports. The amount of honey produced in the U.S. went from 200 million pounds in 1980 to 116 million pounds in 2025. We had a decrease, and yet they're needing more money because they're saying that there's an increase. Well, American producers are falling and failing in their honey production because of all the lack of money, basically, can't pay our laborers. All this stuff is happening, but yet we're going to import more and more of the adulterated honeys, and we're going to promote that using our National Honey Board, which literally was intended only for national or American honey producers. Down from the all-time high of 272 million pounds in 1952. Pesticides is a huge cause of all of this. Even with the reduced volume of production, domestic producers are struggling to sell their honey for a price that would allow them to continue doing business. Looking at the number of colonies in 1980 in the United States before it has dipped to 2.6 million colonies, these numbers tell a different story than the one that the National Honey Board is trying to tell with sales data and consumer surveys. Domestic honey producers are not experiencing growth, they are actually struggling. Increasing the assessment would further burden the domestic honey producers who are not benefiting from how the National Honey Board has chosen to spend the money it already has. The National Honey Board has not supported the domestic honey producers in keeping up national inventory or domestic honey production, as instead used its funds to promote the consumption of foreign honey, further harming hardworking U.S. honey producers. The National Honey Board should cease all promotional activities. Now that's kind of sad because I did a video about all their wonderful publications. But yeah, I'm promoting these publications at local farmers markets. That's where I'm putting them. Focus funds on research that increases the viability and sustainability of production. Honey production, including research on biologically sustainability and pesticide, bee forage, and grassland restoration, such as the research being done by land-grant universities. Focus funds on fraud prevention and detection, such as the work being done by the American Honey Institute at Kansas State and other partnering land grants. Focus funds on mite and pest research, such as the research being done by Project APIS-M. The National Honey Board has exempted the organic class of honey to follow the will of Congress. Domestic producers should be exempt from the honey assessment and imported organic be assessed, thus building the domestic honey industry. Now, those are all recommendations, but the first thing that we need to do is we need to say no. Say no to the increased assessment. And right now, we have a deadline. I think the deadline is like less than 24 hours. I'm sorry it took me this long to put this video together. I have been so busy with the bees. And so isn't this wonderful that they're doing this right when the beekeepers, the American beekeepers are like experiencing spring, and we're like going totally crazy. We have so much work to do. And yet right now is when they're asking for this assessment to be increased. And so voices of beekeepers are not going to be heard. American beekeepers are tired. They're overworked. They're understaffed. They are trying to take care of their families. They're trying to put food on the table. And yet here we go again with, let's try to slide this assessment in, this increase in fees, and promote foreign honey while you're not looking. Nothing to see here. Move on. Anyway, I'm going to put a link in the comments below on where you can go and you can literally say no. Say no to the assessment increase for the National Honey Board. And thank you for your time.